Hello everyone, this is Gene. I'm back with another video. It's very early this Sunday morning here in New York. It's a little before 5. It's about 4:49, 4:50. Yes, I'm a very early riser. I should actually be ironing my clothes for work right now, but I just wanted to sort of revisit this because believe it or not, this is still going. This is what happens to me. I state an opinion, people get upset, and then I guess people who are sort of on my side pick up on it and they opine, and so it goes on. But I wanted to address now that I'm in a bit of a calmer state of mind than I was when I made the first video about this, which was just sort of addressing how people were responding and what they were saying to me in general. I wanted to address a particular argument that was made in this debate, and I use that term very loosely. But it's also used in general when you have these sort of female legacy characters who take on not just the mantle but the literal look, right, of their often more famous male counterpart, right? So King of Slaughter was one of the many people to sort of get into it with me over this, and at a certain point, King of Slaughter had responded to me saying, "Crazy how Laura Kinney is literally Wolverine," and took a screenshot of, I guess, the wiki fandom or the official Marvel page. I'm not sure, right? But it shows her. Let's see if the picture loads. Load picture load. Let's see if it loads. Here we go. So it shows her. It says, Laura Kinney, current alias Wolverine, and again we see her dressed up in Logan's clothes. Right? This isn't even like her own original take on his uniform. It's literally his uniform, right? Black, yellow, the X on the middle of the belt, the claws. It's her dressed up as him. And of course, as I explained in the other video, and as I've certainly explained on Twitter, I take great issue with that because I believe that leaves her um, in his shadow. And as I pointed out, and many I've sent online pointed out, is that Laura, I believe Quartz made a tweet about this, but Laura was originally from the cartoons, from X-Men Evolution. I knew it was one of the cartoons post the 90s one, I just didn't remember which one, right? And that her story arc was that she wanted to be more than just Wolverine's clone. So what does Marvel eventually do in their eternal wisdom? They literally make her Wolverine's clone more than she already is, right? But anyway, there's this constant debate going on that more or less argues, right? The argument, at least from my perspective, the way I understand it, so keep that in mind. The way I understand it is that people like King of Slaughter seem to be under the impression that if the comics make something canon, then it's valid, right? And that, for example, because X-23, Laura Kinney, has been deemed Wolverine in the comics, and several people tweeted comic panels at me where you literally have Wolverine and Laura dressed up as him, like, and he's like, saying, "Yes, you are Wolverine," and all this other stuff. Marvel even tried this when they had this series of books a few years ago. I think around 2017, 2016, 2017, where they had a series of stories. It was Wolverine and X-23. It was Carol Danvers and Kamala Khan. It was Carol Danvers and the original Marvel, and I think Kate Bishop and Clint Barton. But they basically had these stories where these two characters, it's kind of like a past meets present type thing, and they had these stories where these two characters would meet up, and it's more or less the original character being brought in to sort of validate the usually female replacement character, right? Sort of to say, "You are my successor," right? Which was especially funny in the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel case because she had been a hero under her own name of Miss Marvel for literal decades before she was made the most current Captain Marvel, which keeps the Marvel name, or at least superhero name, going, because again, legal issues from way back when. Marvel has to occasionally use the name, so they literally, more or less, for like one story, right, brought Marvel back from the dead. For those who don't know, or don't have like that super deep history of comics, Captain Marvel was originally a Kree warrior named Marvel who came to love Earth, right? And he most famously died in the story arc, I think around 82 or 83. He dies of cancer, so surprisingly enough. And he's one of the few heroes that Marvel more or less has allowed to remain dead, right? They sometimes try to bring him back, but it's usually as like a clone or something. It's not really him, right? For the majority of time since his death in the comics, which was in the early '80s, so it's been decades now. They've actually allowed his death more or less to stick. They haven't done like what they've done to Wolverine, which is murder him in various ways. Logan's been damn near killed by Magneto. He burned up in the sun one time. They literally, there was what, 2014 was literally the death of Wolverine storyline, where like his own adamantium turns him into a statue or something, and then he brought him back um, in 2018 with the return of Wolverine storyline. But anyway, Captain Marvel is one of the few. The original Captain Marvel is one of the few where the death has more or less been maintained. And they literally brought him back for like one issue to validate Carol Danvers being his successor, which she always was. That's why she was called Miss Marvel. And then, because he was dead for all these years, she went on to be her own person, more than just his female counterpart. And then she ends up taking his name and giving up her own name to Kamala Khan, modern day Marvel, everybody. But the reason I bring this up is because there seems to be this idea, or at least what I understand it, is that if the comics say it's true, then you must accept it. This is what I was told very bluntly by King of Slaughter and many others, that, oh, well, the comics make it canon, the comics make it canon, cry about it. Right? But here's the thing. I, as a comic reader, am not required to accept canon. Now, can I stop them from writing it? No, but I can certainly point out where it makes absolutely no sense. I can point out how, from a creative perspective, it's wrong, which fans have been doing since the beginning of time. Because the thing is that in the end, fans, at least to a certain degree, do determine canon, right? Whatever fans like becomes canon. For example, it's not canon, or at least it wasn't canon in the beginning of, say, Superman stories for him to fly. It wasn't canon in the first Batman stories for him to be a martial pacifist, right? To have a strict no-kill code. That was at some point introduced in their stories, and fan embrace made those things canon, right? For example, Sabretooth, right, of the X-Men, or X-Men villain, right? He wasn't always this, super powered, dark reflection of Wolverine. He started out as just pretty much like a petty criminal in a costume, right? He was rewritten, I think, by John Byrne and or Chris Claremont, I forget which one, and reintroduced as, again, this dark counterpart to Wolverine, and as one of the few people who could actually like literally beat and scare the hell out of Logan, right? And again, fan embrace is what led to this becoming canon. The thing about canon is that canon is always being shaped by fan opinion, positive and negative. What is considered disliked by the fans, sooner or later, most of the time, becomes discanon, right? And what is embraced by the fans eventually becomes canon, right? in most instances. So yes, you can point to the actual comics and go, well, the comics make it canon. That doesn't mean that the fans have to accept it. And if enough fans don't accept it, guess what happens? They bring back Logan, which is what they did in 2018. Same way that they, in 2016, 2017, tried to make She-Hulk into Hulk, right? Literally put a book out called Hulk that starred She-Hulk. Eventually, they just brought back Banner. And that's the thing. You cannot make fans like or dislike something. People try. In pro wrestling, Vince McMahon tries to get fans to like or dislike somebody all the time. But in the end, the fans are the fans, and the fans will like and dislike who and what they choose. And that fan response, that fan feedback is a huge, huge influence on what is canon and what eventually becomes discontinuity, right? Becomes a little trivia piece in time, right? Did you remember when in comics this happened? That type of stuff, right? But the general idea behind this type of argument seems to be that if the comics deem it so, then you as a reader have to accept it without any criticism. And not only that, but that you have to now love this character, right? Or rather, the idea is that, let's take Laura, right? Since the comics now deem her as Wolverine and have had Logan, sort of bless her and all that, and deem her a worthy successor, not just of him, but of the literal mantle and appearance of Wolverine, that now you're supposed to view her as valid, a Wolverine as Logan is, and you're supposed to love her as much as you do Logan, right? You're supposed to more or less just go, okay, well, Logan's out and Laura's in. That's not how this works. And that's what they don't want to understand or accept, right? There is a difference between a mantle being passed around, which happens with nearly every long-lived hero, right? But there's always going to be that one person who owns that mantle, who that mantle will always be associated with. For example, in DC with Batman, it's Bruce Wayne. There's been plenty of people to take on the mantle of Batman, right? There's Dick Grayson, there's Terry McGinnis, I think there's Damian Wayne in a few alternate continuities. There's even Thomas Wayne, right? Bruce's father, I think in the Flashpoint storylines or timelines, right? So yes, plenty of people who are not Bruce Wayne have been Batman. But if you ask 100 people who is Batman, they're going to say Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is always going to be associated with Batman. He's always going to be Batman in the public's mind and in the mind of fans, right? He is Batman. Everybody else may wear the costume, may use the mantle, but he's Batman. Same way Robin will always be Dick Grayson. Yes, there have been multiple Robins. Jason Todd, Tim Drake, Stephanie Brown, right? Damian Wayne. There's been multiple Robins. Same way there's been multiple Batgirls. But Batgirl will always be Barbara Gordon, and Robin will always be Dick Grayson. That's simply the way it is. There will always be that one person who will always own that name and that look and that mantle. Similar in pro wrestling, right? You can have someone dress up as Stone Cold Steve Austin. You can hire a big beefy white dude and shave his head and give him a goatee and a black vest and black tights and knee pads and boots. You can make him look like Steve Austin, but he's never gonna be Steve Austin. It's that simple. Steve Austin is Steve Austin. Right? Vince literally tried this back in the 1990s when Scott Hall, who played the character Razor Ramon, and Kevin Nash, who had played the character of Diesel, they went off to a different company, WCCW, which was Vince's chief competition at the time. So he literally hired two wrestlers. One of them who would eventually become known as Kane, right? But he literally hired two wrestlers to dress up as Diesel and to dress up as Razor and to take over those gimmicks, which is what a mantle or a look is called in pro wrestling, right? The persona, the character that you play is in pro wrestling is called a gimmick. And he literally hired two guys. The one who played Diesel would eventually go on to play Kane. That was Glenn Jacobs, right? But he hires these two guys to play Diesel and to play Razor, and guess what? Fans saw right through it, right? They were not convinced. They saw a fraud when it came out. You can, play Razor's music, and you can have this dude have Razor's haircut and the chains, and have his ring entrance and all that. It didn't change the fact that this person was not Scott Hall. Was he Razor Ramon? Chico? Yeah. Was he Scott Hall as Razor Ramon? No, he wasn't. And the fans knew it. And the fans did not accept it. Fundamentally the same here. Is Laura Kinney Wolverine? Yeah, sure. She's dressed up in his clothes. Are people going to accept her as Wolverine? No, they're not. Wolverine is always going to be Logan, which is, of course, what I pointed out down here, right? According to Marvel, Logan is Wolverine. This will always be Wolverine in the minds of fans, both casuals and people who only know the films and longtime fans like myself alike, right? Now, if you were to ask, how many people have had the alias or the mantle of Wolverine, sure, Laura is a perfectly valid answer, right? You would have at least three, right? You would have Wolverine, you would have Logan, you would have Laura, you would have Daken. At the very least, three. And again, that's perfectly objectively true. At least three individuals have been known as Wolverine. But which one of them is Wolverine? That's Logan. That's James Howlett. Let me give another example. Music. My favorite band ever is Queen, right? The lead vocalist of Queen up until literally the day he died was Freddie Mercury, right? Now, if you were to ask any fan of the band who's ever heard their music, whether they're a casual fan or whether they're a hardcore fan and have listened to every track, if you ask people who is the lead singer of Queen, they're gonna say Freddie Mercury, and they would be both right and wrong. Because historically, yes, Freddie Mercury is the lead singer of the band. He was the lead singer from when the band formed in the late 60s or late 60s or early 70s to when he died in 1991. But the current lead singer, obviously, is not Freddie. It's Adam Lambert of American Idol fame. But here's the difference. Adam Lambert knows that he's not Freddie Mercury. He's the lead singer of Queen at this time, and he's done a very good job. I've seen concert footage, right? He has a great voice. He's probably the closest when it comes to his voice and his onstage persona to sort of have that Freddie-like spirit, right? Very playful and camp and all that. But even he knows that he will never, ever, ever be able to replace Freddie Mercury in the hearts of fans. And he doesn't want to my understanding. He understands that he's the lead singer of Queen at this time, but he will never, ever, ever be Freddie Mercury, and he accepts it. When they did the Queen movie, I think 2 years ago, who was it about? It wasn't about Adam Lambert. It was about Freddie Mercury. Because Freddie Mercury will always be the lead singer, the frontman of Queen. When you ask people, who is the frontman of Queen, they're going to say Freddie Mercury. The statues are in his image, not Adam's. And that's not to discredit Adam Lambert as an artist or a singer. I think he's great. But he will never be Freddie. Right? Same way Laura Kinney will never truly be Wolverine. Same way, as much as I like him, Terry McGinnis will never truly be Batman. That will always be Bruce Wayne. You can make Falcon Captain America all you want. Captain America, in the eyes of fans and in the eyes of comic book fans, will always be Steve Rogers. That is simply the truth. That is not to invalidate those characters. It's part of the reason why I am so passionate and adamant about these characters getting their own names so that there's a separation and they can have their own stories and be more than just a legacy character. I have no problem with a mantle being passed around or a mantle being used to build up a newer character. But just like in life itself, right, there has to come a point where you leave the nest, right? Where you leave your parents' home and you forge your own way. You make your own name. Even if you stay in your parents' profession, most people, especially if they're living in someone's shadow, right? Take like the the kids of celebrities. They don't want to be known as just the son or daughter of so and so. They want to be recognized for their own talents under their own name. They want to stand out on their own. That doesn't mean that they're ashamed of who their parents are usually. It's just that they want to be known as more than just so and so's kid, so and so's son, so and so's daughter, so and so grandchild. Which is why so many of them, when they get into the entertainment business, change their name, especially if they come from a long line of well-known Hollywood performers, so that they are not held down or held back, and that they are evaluated on their own merits. So why can't we have the same for characters like Laura? Why can't she be X-23 or Talon, as other people have mentioned? Why does she have to continue to be in Logan's shadow? Not just in his shadow, but now literally just a female clone. And she started out as a female clone. You've made her even more of a clone. Because now she's been totally stripped of her identity. Because the fact of the matter is, whenever I look at this, I don't see Laura Kinney. I don't see X-23. I don't see a woman who once had her own stories and her own comics and her own series. I just look and go, oh, it's Wolverine as a girl. It's some chicken cosplay. That's nice. That does not make me interested in the character. It doesn't make me want to read uh, uh, her own stories. There is a way. A good writer can find a way to maintain that legacy link without doing something like this, literally making her the female version of. For example, Eric July did a video about tokenization, right? Right, and his definition of a tokenized character, and he included, in his opinion, and he has said this, but before he considers female counterpart characters like Supergirl or She-Hulk or Miss Marvel or in this case, Laura Kinney's X-23 as tokenized. I tend to disagree in that regard because these characters did have their own stories. Yes, they are, you want to say, female derivatives or female counterparts, especially in the case of She-Hulk, because her experience as a Hulk was completely different from Banner's for the longest time. But while I disagree with his definition in that part, I do understand where he's coming from. The sad thing is that the comics will actually have some interesting characters like Laura or like Jen Walters as She-Hulk. Have these good writers who oftentimes are men, interestingly enough, build them up, have their own stories, show that they're more than just the female counterpart or the female derivative of, and then modern Marvel, in its eternal wisdom, will undo literal decades of work and put these women who once had their own names and their own stories into the costumes of of their more famous male counterparts and completely erase all that work. They've done it with Laura, and as I've ranted about many, many times over the life of my channel, they have done it to She-Hulk most infamously, right? The thing is that I would say that Eric's definition of a tokenized female character would actually fit She-Hulk now, because she literally is just Bruce or Brucette Banner, right? She's just the Hulk with, she's just Banner Hulk, I should say, with long hair. Whereas previously, I would not agree that his definition of a tokenized female character applies to her. And I've left comments in his video and all this other stuff. I don't think he gives a damn what I think, but I'm just saying I have made it known that in his definition I disagree with having classic She-Hulk as a tokenized woman. Right, so for classic She-Hulk, I would say vehemently no, she was not tokenized. You want to say a female counterpart or a female Hulk, that's fine. But tokenized, I would totally disagree. But now, current She-Hulk, yes, 100%. Just the cheap token. She went from being Jennifer Walters to being Brucette Banner. And it's sad. It's very, very, very sad that they have lost, that the House of Ideas is now not even running on empty. It's beyond empty. They don't even want to try to fill the gas tank anymore. They just want to do what Hollywood does, right? Which is just repackage the old favorites and just expect the fans to just mindlessly consume, buy, accept. Don't think for yourself. And don't you dare have an actual strong knowledge of the comics and the characters and actually be able to refute what people say, because when you do that, well, they just needlessly insult you, and when you keep disproving what they say, they eventually block you. These days, I collect blocks the way that Sonic collects rings. And I do take a certain joy in that. I'm not quite sure if that's appropriate, but it is what it is. But anyhow, that's the video. And I'm going to end it on an image of my most favorite, beloved X-Man and character in comics ever. James Howlett, Logan, Patch, the Wolverine. So anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.